My name is John Hesse. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at DFM Data Corporation. Joining me today are Peter Benson, the Executive Director of ECCMA, and Andrew Cohen, DFM Data's Chief Technology Officer. We're here to show you the path to visibility and clean data. Thank you for registering and attending. I hope you gained some insight from the presentation today. And with that, I will turn it over to Peter.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Andrew, and look forward to this presentation again. Now, my job here is to give you a little bit of explanation of what we do and why the standards are important, and you'll see how that fits into what John is presenting and Andrew is presenting in terms of how we apply it. So international standards are really the lifeblood of a lot of things that we do. We can't exchange USBs unless there's a standard USB. Of course, it would be nice if all the plugs that we plug into the wall were standard internationally, but we haven't quite reached that yet. Europeans are a bit slow to adopt the American plug connections. Anyway, ECCMA is really focused on helping our members develop international standards for describing and identifying fundamental concepts of the supply chain. And they're pretty straightforward and simple. It's who, what, where, and when. And again, if you don't have clarity on what you're talking about, these concepts, then it becomes very challenging. If you don't know who your trading partners are. Now, you may use their name, but again, is that their legal name? Is it their trade name, their DBA? We have different names. Well, there's a standard that tells us exactly how to identify an organization. That's ISO 8001:16. What is the same thing. We have part numbers and we have reference numbers and serial numbers. We also have descriptions and names of products and services. Well, there are standards of how we format that. Where? There's location identifiers. We need to know exactly where something is. The postal address is a bit dated. It's great, but then the cities go and change the names of streets and makes things very complicated. We have GPS today. We can do a much better job of identifying where something is. And of course, when time is important, but there is a standard for time. And not using that standard, you're causing problems for everybody else. It's particularly date and month. In the United States, we typically put month first, followed by day. In Europe, they do day first, followed by month. Of course, if the day is better than or bigger than 12, you don't have a problem. We can always guess, so the computer can guess what you're talking about. But 0106, well, is it the 1st of June or the 6th of January? Well, if you're about to get paid and you've decided that's when you get paid, maybe you should know which one it is. So that's really challenging. The ISO data is so simple. It says we put the year first, followed by the month, followed by the day. It's logical. Computers love it because they can sort it. It's great. It's so simple. But to get advantage standards, we have to apply them. But I'm going to talk to you about how some of this works together and how we fit it all together. Next slide. So what ECCMA does, we were formed in 1999, so we're a bit over 23 years. And we provide our members with digital transformation and supply chain solutions. We work as a group. We're not for profit, which means we're owned by our members. We don't have shareholders. We just have members. And we are a recognized organization by ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, and also by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. But typically what we do, we provide back office data quality control. We do audits of quality of data. We have a couple of online applications our members use to manage their data dictionaries, to also manage their catalogs, and also to validate master data. And probably more important, over the years, we've built up a cooperative tool, a very large master data repository of organizations. A typical company will have about 10 or 15, 20,000 suppliers. In our database, we have about 95,000 suppliers. We also have the materials. Most companies in their material master will have upwards of 100,000. If they're a very large company, we have 6+ million records in our material master. So we manage these shared resources on behalf of our membership so they don't have to keep redoing the same type of work. Individually, they share the work together. And we do research on dictionaries and taxonomies and classifications. And we also do, probably most importantly today, we help our members verify and deduplicate their supplier and their customer masters, and also verify and deduplicate their material masters and their product masters. In fact, I was just on a call today with a Fortune 400 company that's aggregating their ERP systems across the enterprise. Imagine the nightmare of all these disparate material masters they're trying to bring into one, all these disparate supplier masters they're trying to bring into one, and not being able to connect them together. And that's pretty much what we help them to do. Next slide. So we work with the International Standards Organization. Actually, it's called the International Organization for Standardization. That's the first trick. You ask somebody, they know what ISO is. They tend to get the O and the S reversed. But it's an interesting organization. It's based in Geneva, but the membership is by country. US is one member. They have one vote. And so does Sri Lanka and India and Canada and Mexico. All these countries, through their standards organization, are members of ISO, and they agree on international standards. So you participate, individuals like myself and Haley, we participate as experts in committee groups, and we then submit standards for the international community to approve. It's not a fast process. It's about driving consensus, about getting everybody to agree. Typically takes at least 2 years to get to international standard. So I've listed on the screen some of the more important standards that are relevant to what we're talking about today. Again, formatting date, that's where you start. Please use it. It's not hard to use. And of course, formatting identifiers, PO numbers, part numbers, asset numbers, and then of course, formatting the ALEI, authoritative legal entity identifiers, the identifier we use for corporations and organizations. And again, we deal with blockchains and portable data. The two important standards that we're looking at today is actually early stages of committee review. But so far, the response has been positive. To get to a committee review, you have to get enough countries to agree to participate in the development of a new standard, and we have that. So ISO 8001-18 is a standard for formatting location identifiers. That is a point of demarcation, a loading dock, for example, a front door, a back door, front gate. These are specific locations, and we use GPS for that, and it's an open standard. There's no license to use it. It's simply an agreement that we're all going to do it the same way, so it makes it easy. Like date and time. If we all agree to do it the same way, we don't confuse each other. We can communicate more accurately, and we do that. So the natural location identifier is exactly the same thing. We use GPS, and we format it in a way that everybody can understand it and view it. So the cost of implementing standards is very low, sometimes mostly nil. There's no cost involved in doing them. You're simply adopting the standards in your system. Probably most important today is talking about the formatting of a transport unit identifier. The role that plays is absolutely critical, and the consequence of its implementation is very significant in terms of the efficiency of the transport, and particularly in terms of identification of transport units in a way that marketplaces aren't sharing too much data with each other, but just enough to be able to be useful. And that happens in standards a lot. Standards are, a bit of a double-edged sword. You want to share data with your competitors just enough so the system works well and works smoothly, but then each of you can take advantage of that standard to do a lot more. Think of the USB, memory, cards I talked about earlier, or think about the plugs that go in the wall. The fact that we all agree on a standard, we can all produce different systems and different products that take advantage of that standard. If we didn't have that, we couldn't do that. So I'm going to hand over to DFM Data Corp. They're going to show you how they're implementing the TUID, the Transport Unit Identifiers. And we're very, very glad to support their work. And we think it's actually, really unique that this organization recognized that what they're trying to do, they could do it better by moving their work, a lot of their work, into the public arena, into the standards arena. And everybody benefits from that. And that's one of the things we're very grateful for their contributions to standards. John, up to you.
DFM Data Corporation's platform is essentially the implementation of several of the ISO standards that Peter just showed you. What we do is we take the TUID and we connect shipping exchanges using the ISO format. We have a system called the Anonymizer, which cleans phantom data from shipping exchanges, all the while protecting proprietary customer information. So one shipping exchange never sees any data that they don't want shared. For each shipping exchange that participates in our system, we're now a registrar for ECCMA. We are authorized to obtain and register smart prefixes, sub prefixes, ALEIs, NLIs for all of our customers. All of those elements combine along with the date format to allow the TUID to function. And this is all laid out in the ISO 8000 series of standards, so it's completely compliant. Next slide, please. And here I think I'm going to let Andrew explain the TUID.
Thank you, John and Peter. The TUID represents the usage and integration of what Peter referred to as the who, what, when, and where. In other words, creating a global identification for a transport unit or a load that needs to be moved, where we take a number of those ISO standards and put them together along with other information and create a global way of identifying the load that is being moved. And so as you can see in this reference chart, the TUID contains the date, the ISO 8601 date format, along with the NLI formats for both origin and destination, along with the company and purchase order number. So the who, what, when, and where are all integrated into this global identifier. And that also brings with it a status of where that load is or where that transport unit is at that particular time, whether it's booked, whether it's posted, whether it's en route, or whether it's been delivered. Those are the statuses in the GMP status code. So that's what the transport unit identifier is specifically. Next slide, please. On this slide, what you see is how data is moved through the marketplace and through the silos from the manufacturers, as those orders are then both shipped either directly or indirectly through brokers or digital freight marketplaces. And so as you see those loads move through, they're assigned identification numbers either by those brokers or by those digital marketplaces. And those identification numbers that are assigned are while unique to that particular broker or digital marketplace, not necessarily unique to the others, as well as the fact that if a manufacturer is using multiple digital freight marketplaces or multiple brokers, you will see that traffic listed multiple times, which then creates phantom data in the system. And it becomes nearly impossible to know what the status of that load is, whether or not it's covered, and where that load is. Next slide, please. So in this slide, what you see is a very similar slide, except you see the transport orders with the TUID and our anonymizer, which essentially takes the identification of that load from the manufacturer, from the point at which it is shipped. It then anonymizes the data that vendor wants to anonymize. So what it doesn't want to be seen through transit will be anonymized, and only the data that's required to move it will be in that datagram. And that will be assigned and will move through the digital freight marketplaces and the brokers with that identifier. So there's a global identification as that load moves through booking to in transit to delivered. And you can see the TUID statuses change as we move through the slide here from 20 to 40 to 50 as the load transits the marketplace. So in this case, what happens is the system itself notifies all of the members who are participating as those loads, as those transport units move through the system, and they can then understand their status and remove them from the marketplace when they get to the point where they're delivered, eliminating the phantom data from the process.
Prior to June the 16th of this year, there was an opportunity for the supply chain industry or supply chain stakeholders to come together and address many of these issues. The lack of visibility in the supply chain, the inability to eliminate these phantom postings from the digital marketplaces. And so what happens when industry doesn't come together is that the government steps in. And on June 16th, President Biden signed the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, which makes several specific changes to the regulatory authority of the Federal Maritime Commission that is going to change the way shipping exchanges operate. And in fact, it'll likely have an effect on the entire supply chain. At least that's the government's intent, both in the near term and in the long term. So the question that begs answering is why the industry keeps waiting to come together. We're in a situation where the federal government's bringing top-down regulatory pressure, which hasn't been felt yet, but will be. And working together with the ISO and ECCMA, DFM Data Corporation has created an industry-governed solution that everyone can participate in and likely comply with the regulations that are going to come from the Federal Maritime Commission and other players in the regulatory world related to the supply chain. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 contains four very interesting provisions related to the shipping industry. The first provision that I'm highlighting here is the definition of a shipping exchange, which is a platform, digital, over-the-counter, or otherwise, that connects shippers with common carriers for the purpose of entering into contracts for the transport of cargo by vessel or other modes of transportation. Then the law states that no person may operate a shipping exchange without first registering with the Federal Maritime Commission, and that they will be publishing rules under which the registration will occur. What information they will be collecting from shipping exchanges remains unknown at the moment. But there's another section of the law that demonstrates the top-down nature of what the government is doing, and I think highlights how serious they are about trying to fix things in the supply chain. Next slide. So Section 7 of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act contains a reform to the system of detention and demurrage. Last year, while container ships were stuck off the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and containers were stacking up in those ports, if the containers don't move, detention and demurrage charges can apply. So people were being charged for their shipments and their containers that were sitting on the docks, and they were being charged excessive amounts. So Section 7 redefines the way that an entity can invoice for detention and demurrage charges. It became effective the minute that the president signed the bill. So invoices previous to June the 16th, 2022, and invoices that people might still be using now are likely in the detention and demurrage area, not compliant with the current law, and therefore they're unenforceable. So you can't pass go, you can't collect your $200 for detention and demurrage unless your invoice is properly formatted. And most of the market, I don't believe, has any idea that this is out there. So there's another small piece to the legislation, and I'm using small sarcastically. It grants the Federal Maritime Commission the ability to declare a supply chain emergency. So under the law, they have 60 days from June the 16th to request public comment on how and when they should declare an emergency and for how long. Once they declare a supply chain emergency, the Federal Maritime Commission, for the first time, gains jurisdiction over all players in the supply chain: motor carriers, common carriers, shippers, and rail carriers. They've never had this authority before, and one commissioner said to me privately that it's all going to run through us. So, Andrew, I think you can describe the anonymizer for us.
Certainly, thanks, John. So in this slide, the anonymizer, this is a high-level view of the datagrams that are created as a function of the semantic data layer that we use to pass information from one shipping exchange to another. And we use our data lake repository and our ingestion services, the way that we take all of that data and then republish to our members. And so as each shipping exchange and each member comes up online with our semantic layer, then that communication occurs through our anonymizer, and the clarity and real-time visibility into the data is obtained because that is being both updated and then rebroadcasted from our data lake to everyone who has joined our system. So the beauty of this is your systems remain as they are. There is no change necessary to your TMS and your internal systems. The data layer manages that transformation and that movement of data through our data lake to both your systems and all of the systems. Next slide, please. This is sort of the high-level view of our entire system, but our member voice is sort of the step back. You see our data lake and our messaging anonymizer referenced on the right of the screen now. The center of our screen represents our interface to your membership and to managing all of the information about your company, along with the semantic data layer and the layout of the information and the protocols that you're using for us to then move those into our semantic data layer. So all of that happens through our membership portal, and that's something that you have access to manage, and you can you have access to your sub companies and any components thereby. The other ability that it gives you is it gives you the ability to both be part of the changes and updates and future that both the semantic data layer and the movement of data has throughout the system, because you are a member and you can contribute both ideas and potential thoughts for updates to the way the system functions. But using our governance-led model for membership, those suggestions then go to committee and are reviewed, and in our working groups, the decisions are made as to where the extensions will be and how the standards will be updated, because those members our membership making those decisions and choices. As you see from the bottom there, our organization is an industry organization in terms of we're led by our membership, and there are equity opportunities available to be not only a member but also a shareholder in the organization.
We have a situation where government regulation, market forces, and the establishment of new international standards are driving the digital freight ecosystem towards information sharing. Our platform provides a semantic data layer that runs alongside existing systems. I'm going to say that again. Our system runs alongside existing transportation management systems to enable the anonymous exchange of information, including location and statuses. There are a bunch of different ways for companies and customers to partner with DFM Data Corporation to take advantage of not only our TUID, but the ISO 8000 series of standards. And here you see our website, my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions for more information. Happy to take calls or answer emails. These are our services. The Anonymizer, which Andrew walked you through, coupled with the member voice, is a subscription. And we also offer the ability to create a platform as a service white label solution for customers. But to start using a TUID, you need several things that were laid out on the TUID slide. You need the ISO 8601 date format. You need the SmartPrefix. You need an ALEI. You need the NLI location of the origin of the shipment and the destination of the shipment. And DFM Data Corporation is your source for all of those registrations, numbers, and technical application of how to work with our TUID. We also are in a position to offer other services depending upon what your data needs are. ECCMA offers something called a master data audit, where they will come in and help you figure out how to make heads and tails of your data and who your actual customers are and whether or not you have duplicate entries for things that shouldn't be duplicated. And there are several other registration and classifications and things you can do with ECCMA that we're happy to discuss outside of this forum. So please reach out. We'd love to work with any of you, all of you. And with that, I will thank Peter and Andrew for helping with this presentation. And we'll open up for questions and answers. If you would please use the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen, we can deal with all of your questions or any questions.
John, this is Peter. Just a quick summary to make it use to understand what your starter package is. To be able to use the TUID, which is a very simple identifier, and that's attached to each load. Obviously, an organization has to be recognized. We have to know, and the trading partners need to know who they are. So ALA lookup actually comes first. It's very simple. You can do it yourself. We can do it for you. But it basically is looking up your registration in the government system where you were registered. So we as an organization, ECCMA, we were registered in Delaware. So we would go look up in the Delaware corporate registry, and that would tell us what our number is. It's very simple. It's a very simple process. SmartPrefix registration, a little bit different. If we're issuing purchase orders or bills of lading, we need to put a SmartPrefix in front. So whatever you're creating identifiers, numbers that you're sharing with the marketplace, with your trading partners, let's say it's an invoice number or purchase order number or a serial number, those IDs need to be actually linked to you yourself, because we need to know you issued them, so we can, if there are any questions about them, we know you're the authoritative source of those as well. So it's a very simple, the implementation standard is very simple. What DFMC services has done is very, very clever, is finding a way to leverage the standards, to anonymize the data between the different exchanges, so that all exchanges benefit by removing these phantom loads, by removing loads that are actually not there, which when you think of it, it's very frustrating if you're a carrier, you're looking at a marketplace and you're not sure how many of those loads are real. I'm going to waste my time, responding to requests for quotes on a load when, quite frankly, I don't know if it really exists or not. And same thing on both sides. So this very simple process, very simple application of standard really makes the system work that much better. And that's a common trait of standards, things that we all agree on. So we all gain and we get the boost of the efficiency for everybody. It's like the tides, rising tide lifts all boats. It's the same thing. Standards have that effect that they allow us all to operate in a more efficient manner across different systems. Yes, ISO, we provide audits to companies to look at their data, a whole range of their data, see whether it's actually performing as they expect it to perform, and if they're going to make improvements, where should they improve and how should they do that? So the quality of data is really important to everything we do. It's been like the lifeblood of our commerce today, of digital transformation. So this process is an integral part of digital transformation. It's a very important part.
So Peter, we have one question in the Q&A that I think you're best suited to answer. It's why was DFM Data chosen to support these ISO standards?
It's actually the way the standards work. Somebody has to come up with the standards, right? That's usually, you say, well, who came up with it? It's basically there has to be a problem out there, and an organization identifies the problem. They look at it and they say, well, this is not working as well as it could do, and I think I have a solution for it. But to do that, to implement my solution, I'm going to need cooperation across a large number of organizations, and that's where standards come in. So it's really DFM Data Corp that came to ECCMA and said, look, we have this challenge. We have the challenge of how we could improve these marketplaces, but we need to have a common identifier. So the actual TUID, it was DFM Data Services that came up with a transport unit identifier. So this is what we need. All that ECCMA really added to that process is, well, we could create that TUID using international standards. So rather than the TUID simply being a number that DFMDC created, this is a number that's being created using international standards.
Right.
And because you can do it that way, it means many organizations can create TUID. So DFMDC services needs the TUID to do what they need to do in the exchanges, but anybody could create a TUID as well. So it really, the way these standards were created is we have the standards. The DFM Data was looking at how do we solve a specific problem, and by connecting us two together, it looked like the standards may be able to do what you want to do. And we find that a lot. We work with a lot of different organizations. We work on the supply chain most specifically. We have a new group that focuses on supply chain interoperability and integration. So our job is to, from an international community, is to come together and see how we can leverage these standards to improve the supply chain. I hope that answers the question. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it does.
I believe so.
So what's involved in deploying our solution from a technical standpoint? How complicated is it?
Actually, it's not very complicated. I mean, we can deploy the solution in a number of ways. We can provide a small system with a single board computer and our product, and we can just give that to you. We can provide that to you via GitHub so that you can deploy on your own equipment in your own data center, or if you like, you can deploy it in the cloud on a virtual machine in any of the data centers that exist out there, from IBM to Amazon, AWS to Google. wherever you're hosting your data solution, you can deploy. And we're just a very small component that comes up and runs in a VM alongside your systems, and that's where the semantic data layer lives. So it's very simple. It's a very simple README and a very simple install. And like I said, we can either provide it for you or provide the instructions for you to stand it up on your own.
So we're talking about a couple of days, right? Not months.
Absolutely. Yeah. A few days, both standing up our product as well as, sitting down and looking at what exceptions there are in the semantic data layer mapping, if any, and dealing with those exceptions. It's very simple.
Peter, how many potential marketplaces do you think there are out there that we could potentially serve?
Again, what day of the week is it, right? No, and again, it depends. U.S. I believe if we look at the U.S., you're talking about close to 1,500 marketplaces at the moment. But if you go internationally, that doubles by each country. Some countries have more fragmented marketplaces than others, but it's a common trait that these marketplaces, because of the disparate nature of the marketplaces and the transport industry in general, the data that's available to everybody to get a strategic view of the marketplace is actually very poor. And that's why you're seeing governments step in. Governments, you see ships lying offshore off Los Angeles, and everybody turns to the government and goes, how did this happen? And what are you going to do to fix this? And they go, what do you mean? What? This is nothing to do with us. We're not the captain of these ships. We don't book these. So what they look at, we need data, right?
Yep.
That's what's causing this problem to occur. And the more you look internationally, the more. So the government stepped in. And this is a general trend, by the way, that governments are the best at implementing digital transformation because it's actually very cost effective for them. So they're requiring that industry provides better quality data to governments, because if industry won't work together, they will make you work together. I mean, look at the flights, right? All the airlines that take off, all that data is publicly available, right? So that you can try to coordinate and shift and decide. Sometimes I'm at an airport, I get warned before the gate agent knows that the plane's not going to go anywhere, right? Why is that? Because that data is now it's standardized in a way that we can all use it. We don't take advantage. Yet we have different applications, and that's one of the great benefits of standards is that we create data is essentially technology agnostic. We're not looking at the technology, we're looking at the data itself. And if we standardize that data and we manage it in a way that it makes sense, then we basically have great advantage out of it. A lot of the systems you see today that work well is when you see the data is actually being used across many different platforms. So this is a really good example of the implementation of data to solve a very urgent and real problem. These marketplaces have to work together. And they have to work together, yet they need to maintain their own independence. And they're what we call a federated ecosystem, that they're federated to the point that they're actually able to communicate seamlessly with each other, yet they cannot take each other's business because they don't have insight to all the detailed information that each marketplace has. It's a very good application of it, and we're looking forward to it. And as I said, when I was asked about by investors, where we see industry moving, I said the thing that's going to change the most and most quickly is going to be the transport industry. Why? Because we're now starting to see through systems like DFMDC a better communication on the data layer, so we understand what the problems are and the challenges, the shortages and the surpluses, where they're occurring in the system. So I hope we'll see less traffic on the road, maybe, and most certainly lower prices, which could be a consequence of that because we have a better visibility of supply and demand. And a lot of the issues we deal with data is the demand signaling. Do we actually have the good signals on demand of what's really happening in the marketplace? And these phantom loads are just noise in the background, and they cause a lot of damage to a lot of organizations. How can you be efficient when you don't know what's real? So yes, I think this is a very good transformation. We're going to see this applied in lots of different applications. But as far as marketplaces, again, I would say probably closer to 1,500 at the moment in the US, but I believe that could change overnight.
Thanks, Peter. So Andrew mentioned how simple and easy it is from a technical standpoint to get set up. I'm sure some of you are questioning, how do I get started? How much is this all going to cost me? And while I want you to call me and I want to have a conversation and we want to try and customize a solution for you, I can tell you that it's less than the cost of an FTE employee, and that we really want to see shipping exchanges get involved in the system, become members, participate fully in the collaborative environment that we've created, because the day is coming when there will be regulations out of the Federal Maritime Commission. And this is definitely a step in the direction of complying with what they're going to be looking for in terms of data from you, who you are, where you're registered, what kind of business you are, how you do business. They can ask all of these questions, and they likely will ask all of these questions. And if you're a member of the DFM Data Corporation platform, you're going to be poised and ready to have the information at your fingertips to be able to comply with the law. So,
John, I was just looking up, because as I understand your current model, the cost of generating a TUID, so for each load, it needs its own transport unit identifier, but the cost of that is less than a postage stamp. I understand the new cost of a stamp is 60 cents, and I believe you're below 60 cents.
You're correct. They are below 60 cents.
Right?
Yes.
And that's something people need. These are not expensive systems. Once you get into the benefits of standardization, it is not costly to implement. Like I try to explain to people, implementing the date, how hard is that? There's no cost. Just do it. So it's really something that's very simple.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any questions. So I think we'll conclude. Again, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Andrew. And please, please, please reach out to me with questions about DFM Data Corporation and our solution. If you have questions about the ISO standards, please reach out to Peter. And we look forward to working with each and every one of you who are on this call. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Take care.